The fire alarm was screaming. Thick smoke was filling my office, and I was standing near the window of the highest floor of Morgan department stores, watching my perfect life burn in front of me, while my hands were shaking for the first time in many years. People were running outside shouting my name, but the door behind me would not open. And in that dark moment, I thought this was the end, not only of my life but of the secret I had buried for 18 years. I am Daniel Morgan. I am 52 years old. I am the owner of Morgan Department Stores in New York City. And people know me as a strong businessman, a loving husband, a proud father of two, and a man who speaks about values and hard work on big stages. I built my company from nothing, or at least, that is what I always told the world. I spoke about discipline and honesty. I smiled in interviews. I shook hands with important people, and everyone believed I was a symbol of success. But success can hide many things, and behind my expensive suits and confident voice, there was a truth I never had the courage to face. 18 years ago, a young woman worked in one of my stores. Her name was Sarah Miller. She was quiet, beautiful, and very poor. And I saw in her eyes a mix of fear and hope that made me feel powerful. I told myself that I was helping her when I gave her extra hours and small gifts, but slowly my help became something else, something secret, something dirty that I hid from my wife and from the world. She trusted me when I promised her love. She believed me when I said I would marry her. And when she told me she was pregnant, her hands were shaking as she held mine and whispered, "Please, Daniel, do not leave me alone." I remember how my heart was beating fast, not because I loved her, but because I was afraid of losing my image, afraid that people would see the real man behind the perfect mask. Instead of protecting her, I protected myself. I told her she was making a mistake. I told her to solve the problem quietly, and when she refused, I fired her and warned her not to destroy my life. She stood in my office that day, with tears in her eyes, and said, "One day you will remember this moment." And I laughed nervously because I thought money could silence everything. She disappeared from my world, and I continued climbing higher, opening new branches, giving speeches about morality, going home to my wife and children, and if nothing had happened. But at night, when the house was quiet, I sometimes saw her face in the dark, holding a baby in her arms, looking at me without saying a word. I would turn to the other side of the bed and force myself to sleep, telling myself that it was too late, that she had chosen her path, that I had chosen mine. Years passed, and my company became famous across the city. People respected me, newspapers wrote about my success, and I almost believed my own story. Because sometimes, during a business party, while everyone was laughing and music was playing, I would suddenly think, where is she now? Is she alive? What happened to the child she said was mine? And then I would quickly raise my glass and push the thought away. I never tried to find her, because deep inside, I was afraid that I would find the truth. And now, as the smoke filled my lungs and the fire grew closer, I wondered if this was the price of my silence. If this was the moment when all my lies would finally catch up with me. I heard a loud crash behind the door, footsteps running toward me, and a young voice shouting, "Sir, stay where you are, I'm coming." The door broke open, and through the smoke I saw a thin young man rushing toward me without fear, his face serious, his eyes were full of courage. He grabbed my arm and said, "We have to go now," and he pulled me through the fire while the ceiling was shaking above us. I did not know his name, I did not know who he was, but in that moment, my life was in his hands. Outside, I fell on the ground, coughing and trying to breathe, and when I looked around for the young man, I saw him lying still, his clothes burned, his body injured, because he had chosen to save me. As the ambulance doors closed, I felt a strange pain in my chest, not from the smoke, but from a feeling I could not explain, as if my past had just run into the fire to bring me back. And I had no idea that the young man who saved my life was carrying the truth I had tried to escape for 18 long years. When I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I asked was not about my company, not about the damage, but about the young man who had saved me, because his burned face and brave eyes would not leave my mind. A nurse told me he was alive, that he had serious burns on his arms and back, but he would survive, and I felt a deep relief that surprised me, as if his life had suddenly become more important than my own comfort. After I was released, I asked my manager about him, and he told me the young man's name was Noah, that he worked in the warehouse, that he had no higher education, and that he lived alone in a poor neighborhood near the old factories. Something inside me moved when I heard his name, but I did not understand why, and I told myself it was only gratitude, nothing more. I decided to visit him personally, not as the proud owner of Morgan department stores, but as a man who owed his life to someone brave. When I arrived at his address, I was shocked by the small building, the broken stairs, the smell of damp walls, and I felt uncomfortable because I had not entered such a place for many years. He opened the door slowly, his arm wrapped in white bandages, his face pale but calm, and when he saw me he tried to stand straight and said softly, "Sir, you did not have to come." "I wanted to," I replied, looking around the tiny room where a small bed, a wooden chair, and a simple table were all he owned. I thanked him for saving my life. I told him he was brave. I offered him money and promised to support his recovery, and he listened politely, but his eyes were not excited. They were quiet and tired. "It was my duty," he said. "You are my employer." Those words hurt me more than I expected, because I suddenly wished he had saved me for another reason, something more human. While we were talking, my eyes moved to the wall behind him, and there I saw a large photo of a woman, framed carefully, placed in the center, as if she was the heart of this small room. My breath stopped. It was Sarah, older, thinner, but it was her. The same eyes, the same face I had seen in my nightmares for years. I stood up slowly and walked closer to the photo, my hands shaking as I asked, "Who is she?" Noah's voice became soft when he answered, "She is my mother. She died 2 years ago. She worked very hard until her body could not continue." I felt the room spinning around me, but I forced myself to remain calm and asked carefully, "And your father?" He looked down at his hands and said, "I do not know him. My mother never told me his name. She said only that he was a powerful man who chose his image over us." Each word was like a knife in my chest, but he did not know he was speaking to that man. He did not know the truth standing in front of him. I looked at his face more carefully now, at the shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw, and I saw something familiar, something that made my heart beat faster with fear and recognition. Before leaving, I gave him money for his medical care. I told him he could return to work when he felt better. And I walked out of that small room, feeling weaker than I had ever felt in my life. That night, I could not sleep. Sarah's photo was in my mind. Noah's quiet voice was in my ears. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think the thought I had avoided for years. Could he be my son? The next morning, I returned to the hospital where he had been treated, and using my influence, I secretly requested a DNA test, telling myself that I needed certainty before I destroyed my own world. Days later, I sat alone in my office, holding the envelope with trembling hands, staring at my name printed clearly on the paper. When I opened it and read the result, my vision became blurry, because the truth was no longer a fear or a memory. It was written in black ink. Noah was my son. I placed the paper on the desk and covered my face with my hands. And for the first time in many years, I did not think about my image, my company, or society. I thought only about a little boy growing up without a father, while I was giving speeches about family values. I remembered the day I threw Sarah out, her voice shaking as she begged me not to abandon her. And I realized that the fire in my office was nothing compared to the fire I had created in their lives. Now I had a choice: remain silent and protect the perfect world I had built, or face the truth and risk losing everything. For many nights, I sat alone in my dark living room, holding the DNA result in my hands, listening to the silence of my large house, while my wife and children slept peacefully, unaware that their perfect world was about to change. I walked from room to room, looking at the photos on the walls, family vacations, birthdays, smiling faces, and I asked myself if I had a right to break their hearts for a mistake I had hidden for 18 years. But every time I tried to choose silence, I saw Sarah's photo in that small, poor room, and I heard Noah's quiet voice saying that his father had chosen his name and his image over family. I knew he was right. The next day, I called Noah and asked him to meet me in my office, and when he entered, he looked respectful, but distant, as if there was already a wall between us. I asked him to sit down, but my own legs felt weak, and for a long moment I could not speak, because I knew that once the words left my mouth, nothing would ever be the same. "There is something you need to know," I finally said, my voice shaking in a way it never had during any business meeting. He looked at me with confusion, and I continued, "I knew your mother many years ago." His eyes changed, becoming serious, and he whispered, "How?" I took a deep breath and said the words that had been burning inside me. "I am your father." The silence in the room was heavy and painful, and for a second, he did not move, as if his body refused to understand what his ears had just heard. Then he stood up suddenly, his chair falling behind him, and tears filled his eyes as he said, "No, that is not possible." I showed him the DNA result with trembling hands, and I told him everything. How I had been afraid, how I had chosen my image, how I had left his mother alone when she needed me most. He did not shout, he did not insult me, and that silence was harder to bear than anger. "I needed you when I was little," he said slowly, "not now." Each word entered my heart like a quiet punishment, and I felt my strength leaving me as I replied, "I know, and I cannot change the past, but I want to take responsibility now. I want to give you my name, my support, everything that should have been yours from the beginning." He looked at me with deep sadness and asked, "Can you give me back my mother? Can you give me back the nights she cried because she was tired and sick?" I had no answer. For the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. Not as a businessman, not as a leader, but as a father who had failed before he even began. He left my office that day, and soon after, he quit his job at my store, and I realized that money could not repair what I had broken. But I refused to hide again. I called a press conference. I stood in front of cameras, without my usual confident smile, and I told the public the truth. I admitted my relationship with Sarah, my son, my mistake, and my shame. The news spread quickly. My perfect image fell. Some partners left me. My wife could not forgive the betrayal and decided to leave. And my name was no longer spoken with respect, but with blame. Yet inside me, something strange was happening. For the first time, I was not pretending. I sold one of my biggest branches and used the money to build a free medical center in Sarah's name, a place where poor women would never be refused help because they had no insurance. When the building was finished, I stood in front of it alone, reading her name on the sign, and I whispered, "I am sorry." Months later, Noah agreed to meet me again, not because he had forgiven me, but because he wanted to see if my change was real. We spoke quietly, not as strangers, not yet as father and son, but as two men connected by a painful truth. And though the distance between us was still there, it was no longer filled with lies. At night, I now sleep without hearing her crying in my dreams, because I have stopped running from my past. I lost money, I lost status, I lost the image of the perfect man, but I found something I had not felt for years: a clear conscience. I learned that people who pretend to be perfect are often hiding their biggest lies, and that you can lie to others for a time, but you cannot lie to yourself forever. Because one day the truth will stand in front of you and call you by your real name. The best thing a person can do is face their mistakes, admit them, accept the consequences, and try to fix what they can. Because only then does the heart feel lighter. Only then can the soul find peace. And only then can a man truly live as a human being. If you were in Noah's place, would you forgive him? Or would you walk away forever? And if you were Daniel, would you have told the truth, even if it meant losing everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know what you feel about this story. Your voice matters, and your opinion could help someone who is carrying a secret today.